It was early summer in Afghanistan, 2005. The mountains of Kunar province stood silent. Sharp ridges cutting into the clouds, valleys filled with shadows, and small villages hidden between rock and dust. It was beautiful, but deadly. Every path, every tree line could hide an enemy. High above those mountains, a team of 4 American Navy SEALs was preparing for a mission that would soon become one of the most tragic and heroic operations in modern military history. The mission was called Operation Red Wings. Their goal sounded simple: locate and eliminate a high-ranking Taliban leader named Ahmad Shah, responsible for killing dozens of Marines and spreading terror throughout the region. But nothing in those mountains was ever simple. If you're someone who values true courage, stay with me, because this is the story of 4 men who went deep behind enemy lines, knowing they might not come back. Their names were Lieutenant Michael P. Murphy, Petty Officer Danny Dietz, Petty Officer Matthew Axelson, and Hospital Corpsman Marcus Luttrell. They were all part of SEAL Team 10. These weren't just soldiers. They were elite. Years of brutal training had shaped them into specialists capable of surviving in any environment. But Afghanistan was different. The terrain alone could kill you. On June 27, 2005, they boarded a helicopter under the cover of darkness. The rotors sliced through the night as they lifted off from Asadabad, heading deep into enemy territory. No one spoke much. They knew the risk. They knew that if something went wrong, help would be far away. After a long flight, they touched down on a mountainside, roughly 10,000 feet up, and disappeared into the dark forest below. Their mission had begun. The 4 SEALs moved quietly, using night vision goggles and whispering hand signals. The air was thin. The climb was steep. Rocks shifted under their boots. Every sound echoed through the valley. Somewhere below them, Ahmad Shah's fighters patrolled the villages. They found a concealed observation point overlooking a small cluster of houses where Shah's men were believed to be staying. They settled in, hiding under branches and camouflage. The plan was to observe, gather intel, and call in an airstrike once they confirmed the target. But the mountains had other plans. By morning, as the sun rose, their radios struggled to send clear signals. The terrain blocked communications. The temperature rose quickly, and the forest grew alive with sound. Then, out of nowhere, the mission took a turn that no training could have prepared them for. From behind the rocks came a group of Afghan goat herders, old men, teenagers, and small children, herding livestock through the mountains. The SEALs froze. None of the men were armed, but their presence meant disaster. The SEALs now faced an impossible choice. They could release the herders and risk exposure, or detain them, knowing it could compromise the mission morally and strategically. Lieutenant Murphy called for a discussion. The men argued quietly. They knew that if they released the herders, they would likely alert the Taliban. But they couldn't bring themselves to kill unarmed civilians. It went against everything they stood for. After a tense moment, Murphy made the call. "We're not murderers. We let them go." It was a decision made from honor, and it would cost them everything. The herders disappeared down the mountain trail. The SEALs knew time was short. They began to move uphill, trying to find a better position, hoping extraction could be called in before the Taliban arrived. But within an hour, they heard the sound. Distant voices, then gunfire, then hundreds of footsteps moving through the forest below. The Taliban were coming, and they knew exactly where the SEALs were. At first, it was just flashes of light, muzzle fire from below. Bullets ripped through the trees. The SEALs dropped behind rocks and returned fire. The mountains exploded with sound. They were 4 against at least 50. Some reports say more than 100. The fight became chaos. Danny Dietz was hit early, his thumb shattered, his radio damaged. Axe and Luttrell moved to cover him, laying down suppressing fire. Murphy tried to reach HQ, but the radio signal was too weak. The mountains blocked everything. Grenades burst around them. The team slid down steep cliffs, dirt and blood mixing as they fought to stay alive. Every time they thought they found cover, more fire came from above. The SEALs kept fighting. They refused to surrender. Each man covered the others, moving downhill inch by inch. By mid-afternoon, all four were wounded. But they were still fighting. Danny Dietz, shot multiple times, refused to stop firing. Matthew Axelson, bleeding and half-blind, continued to protect his team. Luttrell, injured by shrapnel, stayed beside them, returning fire again and again. And Murphy, calm and determined, did something few would ever forget. He realized their only chance was to get a clear signal for help. But the only way to do that was to step out from cover, into the open. He knew it meant certain death. Murphy dropped his gear, moved into an exposed position, and tried to make the call. He connected, long enough to give their coordinates, before a bullet struck him in the back. Still, he finished the transmission. His last words, "Thank you." Then the line went silent. In that moment, far away at the base, the operators realized what had happened. A rescue was launched immediately. But the SEALs on the ground were still trapped, alone, surrounded, and outnumbered. The battle wasn't over yet. Back at the U.S. base in Asadabad, the radio room had gone silent. Then suddenly, a faint voice broke through the static. It was Lieutenant Michael Murphy. His voice was calm but strained. "We're under heavy fire. Request immediate support." Then nothing. The signal faded. The room froze. Every operator there knew what that meant. A SEAL team was in deep trouble, cut off behind enemy lines. Commanders didn't hesitate. They scrambled a quick reaction force made up of 8 SEALs and 8 Army Night Stalkers from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, some of the most skilled pilots in the world. Their aircraft, a CH-47 Chinook helicopter. Their mission, reach the mountains, extract the SEALs, and bring them home. But what they didn't know was that the Taliban were already waiting. The SEALs were still fighting. Hours had passed since the ambush began. The forest was filled with smoke and gunfire. Marcus Luttrell, the team's medic, crawled through the rocks, trying to help Danny Dietz, who had been hit again and again. Danny's breathing was shallow, but he refused to give up. He kept firing bursts from his rifle even as blood soaked through his uniform. "Keep your head down, Danny," Marcus whispered, pulling him behind a tree. But there was nowhere to hide. The enemy surrounded them from multiple sides, closing in tighter with each minute. Axelson was hit next. Shrapnel tore through his face and chest. Still he kept fighting. Murphy, already wounded, shouted orders, calling targets, moving position to draw fire away from his men. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of ammunition. Above them, they could hear the faint echo of rotor blades, the sound of hope. The rescue was coming. At 4 p.m., the Chinook lifted off with its escort of Apache helicopters. The pilots flew low, weaving between mountain ridges, scanning for enemy fire. The Apaches moved ahead, clearing the route, while the Chinook followed close behind. Inside the cargo bay, the rescue SEALs sat in silence. Each man checked his gear, loaded his weapon, and stared at the floor. They knew this was a dangerous flight. No air cover, no intel on enemy positions, and daylight fading fast. Still, they went. Because that's what they do. They go when others can't. As the Chinook approached the valley near Sautalosar Mountain, villagers below had already alerted the Taliban. Hidden on the ridges were fighters armed with RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades. The helicopter slowed down to hover. The rescue team was minutes away from fast roping in. Then in a single flash, everything changed. An RPG streaked through the air. a trail of smoke rising from the forest. The missile struck the Chinook directly. The explosion was massive, a ball of fire tearing through the sky. The aircraft spun out of control, broke apart, and crashed into the side of the mountain. All 16 men on board were killed instantly. The radio at base went dead again. Silence. Then the call came through. Chinook down. It was the single deadliest day for U.S. Special Operations since World War II. Back in the mountains, the 4 SEALs didn't know exactly what had happened, but they heard the explosion. They looked up and saw smoke rising in the distance. Murphy's head dropped. They knew. The rescue had failed. Still, they kept fighting. They refused to surrender. Marcus Luttrell was the only one still mobile. He dragged Danny behind cover, but Dietz was too weak. He looked at Marcus and tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Moments later, he went still. Danny was gone. Murphy was hit again, this time fatally. He died where he stood, his radio still in his hand. That left 2. Axelson and Luttrell moved downhill, sliding through dirt and rock, trying to escape. Axelson's vision was blurred from blood and dust. He told Marcus to keep going. "I'm hit bad," he said quietly. "But you've got to move." Luttrell didn't want to leave him, but there was no choice. Axelson turned back, covering him with what little ammo he had left. Marcus crawled away, praying his teammate would follow. A few minutes later, another gunfight erupted. When Marcus looked back, Ax was gone. He was the 3rd to fall. Now, only Marcus Luttrell remained. Marcus slid down a steep cliff, crashing through trees and rocks, smashing his body against the terrain. His bones cracked, his back burned, and his legs were shredded. But he was alive. Barely. He crawled for hours, drinking from mud puddles, hiding from Taliban patrols searching the mountains. He was hunted, alone. His radio was dead, his body broken. Every movement was agony, but he kept going. For days, he dragged himself through the wilderness, surviving on sheer willpower and the thought of his fallen brothers. He eventually found a small stream and collapsed beside it. Then, through the blur of exhaustion, he saw something. A man approaching, wearing traditional Afghan clothing, carrying a rifle. Marcus raised his weapon, but he couldn't fire. His arms wouldn't move. The man reached him, saw his wounds, and instead of finishing him, he said a single word. "American." Marcus nodded weakly. The man knelt beside him, gave him water, and called for help. His name was Mohammed Gulab, a villager from Sabre, who followed a 2,000-year-old tribal code known as Pashtunwali, which demanded that any guest, even an enemy, be protected. Gulab brought Marcus to his village, hiding him from the Taliban who were searching the area. For days, the villagers risked their lives to protect him. They refused to hand him over, even when surrounded by Taliban fighters. Gulab and his people sent a messenger to a U.S. base, walking miles through the mountains to deliver the news. An American soldier is alive. Days later, American helicopters returned, this time with overwhelming force. They located Sabre village and found Marcus, emaciated, wounded, but alive. The men who lifted him into the helicopter saw a ghost, the lone survivor of Operation Red Wings. When they told him the others were gone, Marcus said nothing. He just stared at the floor. When the rescue team lifted Marcus Luttrell off the mountains of Afghanistan, the war seemed quiet for a moment. The helicopter blades pounded through the air, but inside, everything felt still. Marcus didn't speak. He just held on to the stretcher, staring blankly at the ground below. He had been missing for days, hunted, injured, starving, but somehow alive. The last survivor of Operation Red Wings, When the helicopter landed back at the base, medics rushed him inside. They checked his wounds, rehydrated him, and tried to ask questions. But Marcus only wanted one thing. What about my brothers? When they told him the truth, that Murphy, Dietz, and Axelson were gone, and that the rescue Chinook had also been shot down, he turned away. There were no words for that kind of loss. News of the failed mission spread quickly across Afghanistan and back home. 16 American special operators killed in one crash. 3 SEALs missing, later confirmed dead. Only 1 returned. It was a heavy blow to the entire U.S. military community, a reminder that even the best, the most elite, can fall when the odds are impossible. But the story wasn't just about loss. It was also about loyalty, sacrifice, and an ancient promise kept by strangers in a faraway village. In the small Afghan village of Sabre, Mohammad Gulab and his people continued to risk everything. Even after Marcus was rescued, the Taliban came back, threatening them for helping an American. But Gulab refused to betray his guest. Under the code of Pashtunwali, he had given Marcus his word, and that word was sacred. In the days before U.S. forces arrived, the Taliban surrounded the village several times, shouting threats, demanding that the American be handed over. The villagers stood their ground. Some armed themselves with old rifles, others just with courage. For days, they fought off small attacks, buying Marcus time to survive. When American forces finally reached Sabre, Gulab was there waiting. He guided the soldiers to Marcus and helped carry him to safety. The 2 men, a Texan, Navy SEAL, and an Afghan villager, formed a bond that would last for years. Marcus returned to the United States to recover from his injuries. He spent weeks in a hospital, slowly regaining strength. Physically, he healed, but mentally, the war followed him home. He carried the memories of his brothers, Murphy, Axe, and Dietz, everywhere he went. He replayed their last moments over and over, wondering if he could have done more. Survivors often carry that kind of pain, the kind no medal or speech can take away. But Marcus didn't stay silent. He decided their story needed to be told, not as a movie or a myth, but as a promise that people would know who they were and what they did. He began writing down everything that happened, every sound, every decision, every moment of fear and courage in those mountains. That became the book Lone Survivor. It wasn't a story about him. It was a tribute to his brothers. Lieutenant Michael Murphy was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. His actions, stepping into the open to make that radio call under fire, became a symbol of ultimate sacrifice. In his hometown of Patchogue, New York, a park now bears his name. Children play where he once trained, and his statue stands as a reminder that courage isn't just about surviving. It's about doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything. Petty Officer Danny Dietz was remembered as a quiet but fearless man, loyal to his team until his last breath. His name now lives on through memorial runs and foundations supporting military families. Matthew Axe Axelson, known for his calm precision and steady mind, was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross. His wife, Cindy, became a symbol of strength, honoring his memory by supporting other military spouses. And the 16 men who died in the Chinook crash, 8 SEALs, 8 Army Night Stalkers, are remembered as the heroes of that rescue that never came. Their sacrifice showed that even in failure, there can be honor. Marcus Luttrell eventually returned to service, but the weight of what he had lived through never truly left. He struggled with the memories, the nightmares, and the feeling of being the one who made it out when so many didn't. He once said in an interview, "I wasn't saved because I was special. I was saved to tell their story. And that's exactly what he did. He traveled across the U.S., speaking about teamwork, brotherhood, and sacrifice. His story inspired books, documentaries, and later, a film that reached millions of people worldwide. But Marcus always reminded everyone that Lone Survivor wasn't about him. It was about Murphy, Axe, and Dietz. They were the heroes, he said. I was just the witness. Operation Red Wings wasn't a victory in the military sense. The mission failed. The enemy escaped. Lives were lost. But its legacy wasn't about the outcome. It was about the men who refused to quit. They fought with everything they had, not for glory, but for each other. They showed what courage really means when you strip away politics, medals, and orders. It's doing your duty, standing by your brothers, and never leaving anyone behind, even when the whole world turns against you. Years after the mission, Marcus Luttrell and Mohammed Gulab reunited several times. Gulab eventually fled Afghanistan after receiving death threats from the Taliban for helping Marcus. The two stayed friends, their bond crossing language, culture, and belief. Marcus said that Gulab reminded him what humanity looks like, even in the darkest places on earth. Their friendship became one of the most powerful symbols to come out of the war, proof that compassion can survive even in chaos. Every year, on the anniversary of Operation Red Wings, families, veterans, and friends gather to honor the fallen. They read the names. They tell the stories. They remember the men who went into those mountains, not because they had to, but because they believed it was right. In the end, that's what makes them unforgettable. 4 SEALs went into those mountains. Only one came back, but none of them were ever truly lost.